Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining. My name is Kenny. I am the founder of STR Insights. And I am excited to bring this live call today with Avery Carl. We're going to be talking about the outlook on the STR industry in 2023. And so I'm really excited about this one because Avery is in, and she can correct me when I bring her on here, but she's in over 15 different markets, or not even markets, like regions of the country, like popular STR markets across the country. She understands a lot about these markets and, the trends and patterns, at least in the last year or two. And so she has kind of that pulse on those markets. And then coming from my side, I have a lot of data. And I really love taking that data and that information in markets I've never been to, looking at those trends and patterns, and then bringing them to people like Avery who have that expertise or that knowledge and wisdom about those particular markets and piecing it together. A lot of you guys have heard Bill Faith and I on our podcast, STRnomics, do that. We talked about amenities, and I just took data about the Gulf Shores market that I didn't know too much about. Here's the data, Bill, explain it from your experience, because as many of you know, he knows that market well. And he was able to explain, okay, this is why probably the data is saying this. And so I've got Avery. So once again, let me introduce Avery. She is the CEO or the owner of the Short Term Shop. Like I said, she's in over 15 major short-term rental markets across the country. Her headquarters is in the Smokies, and that's where she kind of got started. She is an awesome realtor, and she's very knowledgeable. She also has a book, I always mix up the two. So it's like long-term, short-term wealth or something. Like I'm so sorry, Avery. I should have had some notes on the side here. Without further ado, let's bring her in and probably correct what I just said.
Yeah. It's short-term rental, long-term wealth.
There we go. Yeah. I always mess it up. I'm like you guys need to read this book. Anyway, it is a great book. I have read it. And we're actually, just so everybody knows, we are putting out some blog posts. We're going to show you guys some of the books that we really enjoy, and that's definitely on the list, especially if you're starting out. You definitely need to read that. So Avery, thank you for hopping on here. I also want to just get clarification too. You're in over 15 different STR regions. Is it more than that now, or since the last time we talked? I know it's been a couple of months.
It's right about 15, and we are opening up the next one probably around the end of the month.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. That's super exciting. And we can talk about that later or not, whatever. But I think it's interesting though, because you're still opening up areas. Mm-hmm. And why is that? Why are you looking for more markets? I mean, frankly, just looking at the data from my side, a lot of markets across the country have taken some sort of hit. So why are you optimistic about just the general outlook, and why are you opening up new markets?
Yeah. So mainly we open up new markets to give our clients more options in terms of price point, in terms of area of the country, of different demographics of vacationers. We do stick to mostly mature vacation rental markets. So those, I feel like, again, my way is not the right and only way. There's lots of people making money doing things differently than I do. But it's my belief that as time goes on and metro markets tighten up on regulations with short-term rentals, that the true vacation market, the value of a true vacation market, is only going to go up for investors because the regulations are favorable there. So we open up in new markets just to kind of branch out and give our clients more options, and just to kind of, do new things.
So what do you look for specifically? Obviously, they've got to be a traditional vacation rental market, and that's super important. But what are you looking for in these new markets that you decide to go open up?
Well, so again, options is important. So We're probably not going to go open. Like, for example, this is a really random example. Heber Springs, Arkansas is a place that I have gone to go trout fishing and we've stayed in short-term rentals there. The only thing there though is this one little river. I think it's called a Red River. Y'all don't stone me for not knowing that. Been a couple of times though.
I get stoned a lot, so it's okay.
Yeah, so we would probably never open up in a place like that because it's just got this one little area and this one little, like, maybe a mile of river. Whereas, some of the other markets that we're in have more than one attraction, like the beach, but also we've got so we'll take Destin, for example. We have the beach, we have all kinds of attractions other than that. We've got airports really close by. We've got a lot of military bases. Smoky Mountains has Smoky Mountain National Park. There's Dollywood. So we look for options within a market and also different little areas. So again, we'll take like the Emerald Coast, for example. So 30A is super luxury, but then Destin is kind of middle of the road. But then if you go down to Panama City, it's much more affordable. So we like to make sure that there are different price point options and different little areas within a market so that we can tailor it to our clients and what their, what their budget is and what their goals are.
Okay. That's really interesting. Let's first off, which is your favorite market besides the Smokies?
It's hard to say. So I really love the Emerald Coast. I also really love the Forgotten Coast of Florida. That's where I bought my most recent one. There's not a lot of great data on the Forgotten Coast. So I think people are a little bit scared of it because like 90% of the short-term rentals there, like everything's short-term rentals there, just like a lot of vacation markets. But most of them are on like 2 or 3 really, really, really old school property management companies that are not optimizing technology. Mm-hmm. They're not optimizing their decor or anything like that. But I've really enjoyed that market the past couple of years. So I'm going to say Forgotten Coast.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm actually on the Emerald Coast right now. We're getting our, for everyone listening, I live in Buffalo and we've made the news twice this year already for snow. And so we are doing our getaway right now. So anyway, in Destin. So it's not, we just got in last night, but yeah, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And I'm like, man, I really want to have a house here one day. But all right, let's talk more about, let's bring in some data and have you kind of just get your thoughts on it. So I did a little bit of research and something interesting, an interesting trend or pattern I've found is that listings, and I might have to explain this twice because I'm usually terrible about explaining things, but listings that started in 2022, if we look at the last 3 months, so we'll say October, November, and December, listings that started in 2022, 6 months before these dates, so beginning of 2022, are doing are doing 20 to 30% on average less than listings that are over a year old. So they were started in 2021. Now there's listings that are older than that are, we could group in this analysis, but what I'm seeing is that newer listings are getting hit harder in terms of revenue and maybe even expectations. I've spoken to a lot of people in different markets and who've been kind of like, hey, I was looking at 2021 numbers and I'm 40% less than what it was in 2021. Are you seeing this across the board? So the people I've spoken to who've seen this, who started in 2022, I should say, there were some of the Smokies, Broken Bow, and then Crystal Beach has been hit pretty hard as well in terms of the expectation and the reality of the numbers. So what are you seeing and maybe elaborate as to maybe why that's going on?
Yeah, so I have seen a little bit about that. And well, actually, I want to touch on one thing you said about Crystal Beach. So I saw, and I don't know if you noticed this, I was just looking particularly or specifically at this a couple of days ago. The numbers for 4 bedrooms in Crystal Beach were hit pretty hard, but the numbers for 5 bedrooms went up a little bit. And I haven't done any digging into that, but I found that interesting. But I have seen, have you seen that or you haven't looked?
I haven't looked. I will go look and then I will go find out why. I have some ideas, but you go ahead.
Yeah, you tell me why that is. But yeah, I have seen that. So especially with my own listing. So several of ours in the Smokies have been on since like 2016. So we have a ton of reviews, and my Smokies properties are, I mean, they're cute, nice places to stay. We've updated them over the years, but they're not the like, they're middle of the road properties. You know, they're cute, clean, comfortable, but they're nothing spectacular. And I've seen our numbers have actually increased a little bit between 2021 and 2022. And I've seen people who have newer, nicer properties than us that have been hit a little bit. And I think that the difference is because we have all of those reviews that, maybe, I don't know if it was probably a mixture of a few things, the economy, the Airbnb algorithm, which, I mean, nobody can really seem to figure out at this point. But we've been on there for a long time. So I would attribute it to that. And then I think also there's a little bit of a lot of people that bought in 2021 and then the first 6 months of 2022 were kind of under the impression they can just slap something up on Airbnb and call it a day and it's going to make money. And it's not like that. You have to manage your property. You have to manage your systems. You have to pay attention. You have to go in there and tweak things daily. And I think that people who bought in 2021 that went and told their friends, like, yeah, this is awesome, I don't have to do anything, it's just up there on Airbnb and it's making me money. A wave of people kind of bought and thought, okay, cool, I can just slap this up and leave it without actually managing it. And I think there's a little bit of that going on as well.
So, I've heard you talk about this on other podcasts before. So there's this term that's been thrown around, the Airbnb gold rush, and is it over? I mean, based on the numbers and everything that you're seeing, I mean, is it truly over?
I think, yeah. So, I mean, I don't think that Airbnb or short-term rentals are over. I do think the initial wave of that gold rush probably is because, anytime a new asset class comes to, like, I don't know why I can't think of my words right now. Anytime a new asset class pops up, emerges, yes, synonyms. Somebody get me a thesaurus. I'm going to blame my head cold. But anyway, anytime a new asset class pops up, like there's a lot of, Bigger Pockets listeners, people who listen to a lot of different real estate podcasts, a lot of that content will kind of like start to overlap. And then everybody's like, a couple of years ago, it was, and still is kind of storage units. And everybody's like, oh, I got to get a storage unit. And I think the same thing happened with short-term rentals, that it kind of popped up and, they've been around for a long time, but with Airbnb kind of, coming to the forefront of the industry and making it much easier for people to be able to do it without the use of a traditional property manager. I think a lot of people jumped in and a lot of people have made a lot of money, and I think they'll continue to make a lot of money, but it's the newness is kind of worn off. There's other things that have popped up too that people are kind of gravitating towards. So I think it's always going to be a valuable asset class to have in your portfolio. And I'm kind of glad that, the tide's going out a little bit on it, so the rest of us can get back to investing without having to compete against, 37 other people on every single offer.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I've definitely seen, and I guess from your perspective too, I mean, has things turned into more of a buyer's market? Or are we still seeing a strong seller's market?
It's evened out a lot. I wouldn't call it a full-on buyer's market just yet because there's still a lot of sellers trying to hang on to those 2021 prices that just won't come down. But it's definitely on its way, and it's definitely a lot easier to get a deal than it has been probably in the past 3 years. So in terms of actually being able to get a deal, in terms of money off purchase price, seller contributing towards closing costs that you can then use to buy down your interest rate, you can do that stuff now. Whereas last year, I would tell you had to go like 50,000 over asking price on every single offer just to be considered. Now you can actually be a real estate investor and negotiate and make lower offers and ask for concessions and things like that and actually get a deal.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, like, for example, are you seeing more opportunities to do like seller financing or owner financing?
Yes and no. So the opportunity is there. There's a little more opportunity there because the market has cooled down and it's not as easy to sell a property as it used to be. But in the sense that most people who are selling short-term rentals are either 1031 exchanging or, these aren't necessarily properties that are in distress by any means, which is typically why someone would agree to seller financing, because they are in distress. So these are all investors or second homeowners, like vacation homeowners. And usually they just want to take all their money now and go do something else with it rather than be paid over time. So there's definitely more opportunity. I have seen it happen a few times this year where a seller will agree to do seller financing or subject to or something like that. But still not as much as in like a C-class long-term rental market.
Okay. What markets are you seeing better deals in?
It just depends. The ones that got really, really, really high with the prices last year, like I'm talking $1 million for something that was 500 a couple years ago. I'm seeing like Emerald Coast 30A is definitely coming down, and Smokies are coming down. But I mean, there are other markets that the prices are already affordable. Like even at last year, they were more affordable than other, like we call them our blue chip markets versus our emerging markets. So Smokies, Emerald Coast, the tourism's not going anywhere. There's always going to be millions and millions and millions of people coming. It's always going to be a great place to own, but you're going to pay for that. Whereas other ones like Myrtle Beach or the Western North Carolina area, like mountains in Western North Carolina, those prices are affordable still. So, and they were last year. So, really good deal opportunities in those markets too.
Gotcha. So let's go back, I guess, to outlook in terms of 2023. I always want to preface this, everyone listening. First off, if you love what we're talking about, like and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, but just give us a shout out. You can comment, ask questions here. We've got a couple, people saying hey. So hey, Tony. So I guess Avery, your outlook on 2023. Let's do a couple scenarios here. Let's pretend I'm a new investor and I come to you. I tell you my budget, and let's say it fits all the markets. What do you tell me to do? Where do you tell me to look? What should I prepare for? Should I even invest in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's always better to go ahead and get the ball rolling than to wait, because you might just wait yourself out of, like, who knows, the interest rates could go up next year, or things could turn around and the interest rates go down some, but then the prices go back up. So there's always going to be some reason to find not to buy something. And what I would tell you is I'd want to know what you want your high season to be. So to me, occupancy rate doesn't mean anything. Average daily rate doesn't mean anything. I am only looking at the gross income of a market. But there's a certain comfort level, especially for new investors who want to see a higher occupancy rate. They just want to see asses in the seats all year. That makes them comfortable. So I would say, are you that kind of person? Do you want a summer high season? Do you want a winter high season? Are you trying to offset, maybe you already own a property that has a summer high, so maybe you want to own something that has a winter high season, so your off seasons are different. I'd want to know that. I want to know what your budget is. Are you okay with condos? Some people aren't okay with condos. I'm totally cool with condos in vacation markets because you don't really have to worry as much about them changing the rules on you or saying no short-term rentals like you would if you were buying in an area where a lot of people live in the condos. But, like Panama City, Myrtle Beach, those areas are pretty affordable. And those condo buildings exist specifically for short-term rentals. So places like that, I wouldn't be too worried about a condo. But some people, they're not condo people, and that's fine. So I'd want to know a few of those things before we figure it out. But I mean, there's no matter your budget or your goals, there's a market for you if you want to be a short-term rental investor.
How valuable is location within a market? I call it micro markets, but how valuable is location, purchasing the property in the right location in 2023, you think?
Location, I mean, in terms of the market itself, I think the market is more important than the property itself. But then in terms of the location within the market, it's getting more and more important. Like we're seeing people who 2 years ago just really, really wanted to get in the short-term rental game so hard that they would buy things outside of the perimeter that we would kind of give them. And we'd say, this is a little too far north. You're going to be like 45 minutes from everything. And they didn't care. They said, we just want to get in the game. We're okay with that. Those are the people that are kind of suffering now that things are slowing down a little bit, that bought like kind of outside of the perimeter of what really makes sense, or maybe bought something a little weird in terms of the aesthetic of the property. So I think that location within the market is very important. You have to kind of stay, whatever market it is, you need to stay within that little perimeter of what you know really works.
Gotcha. Okay. I really like that. And then when you're looking for properties this year, what what are things that kind of stand out to you? You kind of touched on property types, but also are you encouraging investors to do rehabs or brand new properties, or new, or I should say brand new construction at least? What are you seeing that's working well, or any type of trends there?
I think that there's always value add properties are always going to be a good way to go, especially now with interest rates the way that they are. So if you can already force some equity by buying something that needs some work, then you're going to be in better shape. I don't have anything against new constructions. There are some out there that are good opportunities. I would recommend a new construction for somebody who's brand new, who might to real estate investing and rehabs and stuff, or just an existing construction that doesn't need much. Just I see a lot of investors who will come to us and they'll be a brand new investor. They've never swung a hammer in their life before. They've never overseen like even somebody putting floor down, and they're like, okay, I want to, I'm going to buy a piece of land and I'm going to build all this stuff from the ground up, or I'm going to buy something that for 50 cents on the dollar that needs to be completely gutted and redo it. And I'm going to make it the coolest thing that anybody's ever seen in this entire market. And it's going to be amazing. And it's going to have a zillion followers on Instagram. Those are the kind of people that if they ever get started, they really, really get smacked in the face, because it's not easy being brand new and not knowing anything about doing a rehab and wanting to do something huge. So I would say to a new investor, maybe an existing construction that doesn't need a whole lot is the way to go. But if you're decently experienced, value add is always going to be a good way to go too.
I agree with that. I believe that it's getting more and more important for investors to invest in places that either they have to fix it up to a standard or it has to already be at that standard, because guests no longer want to stay in places that are less nice, or they want to stay in places that are as nice or better than their current homes that they live in.
Yeah.
And so, we used to, I call it grandma's closet, the term Golden Girls, where you just buy, I used to see that in like Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, even, these houses that you're like, who the heck like furnished this place?
Wicker
It's old
furniture.
furniture. Yeah, exactly. And those people will struggle if they buy a house in the 90s or 2000s after hurricane. We really need to be, if you're new to this, you need to understand this concept that guests are looking for properties that are nicer than their current home. So whoever your guest avatar is, you need to study that and understand your target demographic, and then find properties. You're either going to have to fix it up. And frankly, I haven't bought it. So I have 6 properties. All the properties, I've had to do something to them. Even if I thought they were quote unquote turnkey, there's always something. None of them are brand new. And I think that's probably why. But unless it's a brand new construction, you're probably going to have to do something to it. And everybody listening, you need to consider that into your budget before you purchase a property. Not the closing costs, not the down payment, but additional furnishings and a slight maybe just painting the walls or something, but you're going to have to do something to that property, and it needs to be considered in your budget. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox there, but it's a common theme that I've seen a lot of newer investors kind of fail to consider. I ask them, what's your budget? And they say, well, I've got, I can do a 10% down, I can afford a $50,000. That's my budget. I'm like, so that's your down payment on a $500,000 home. And that's what you're telling me. But have you considered furnishings? Have you considered rehab? All these other things you're going to have to do. No. Okay. Maybe we need to readjust that. So, kind of pivoting a little bit and going back to, individual, I guess, what we call emerging markets for 2023. Are there any that are kind of standing out to you that are performing well, or just kind of doing generally better than what you've seen in the past, or any trends like that?
Let me think. So, I mean, the standards have kind of stayed the same over the course of time. Like if you have a cute, nice, comfortable place to stay, then you're going to continue to do well. Or if you're able to buy a place that, like my most recent one that I bought was a 3 bedroom, listed as a 3 bedroom, but there was a partially finished downstairs, like really big utility room that all we had to do was paint it. Really, it already had drywall, it just wasn't painted, and turn it into a 4. So I think as long as I think decor is more important now than it used to be.
Right.
Like you were talking about Golden Girl stuff on the beach, like, the grandma cabin stuff that's all like antiques that your grandma would probably really like, but it just doesn't, it's not cool. It doesn't look good anymore. You used to be able to get away with that in the big markets of like, yeah, it's grandma is full of like bear and moose crap, but you do have to update things now and make sure that they look, uh, kind of younger and hipper than they used to be, because people don't want to feel like they're staying in their grandma's dusty old cabin anymore. And that you used to be able to get away with that, but you can't anymore.
I really like that point. We'll get to some of these questions in a second. I do want to kind of answer the kind of that focus on the outlook real quick, and then we'll go back to some of the questions and comments for those listening. Paras, I apologize. I don't know if that's how to say your name, but we'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to ask you, so we've talked about new investors. Let's go to experienced investors. So maybe investors who, really there's kind of 2 categories. There's people who've already bought short-term rentals who they're looking for their next to grow their portfolio. Maybe they want to quit that W-2, or people who have them already who are trying to offset W-2 income as well for the tax savings, but they still want to make a prudent decision. What's your advice for them and kind of how to approach this year?
Yeah. So, yes, the tax savings are great. Being able to do a cost seg is great. I think that should be secondary, though, to cash flow in any, whether it's a multifamily, long term, or commercial or anything. For me,
Yep.
cash flow is most important. Tax savings are secondary, because it's great. It's great if you have a, $100 million net worth, but if you don't have any cash, you can't buy a sandwich. So you want to focus on cash flow still. Yes, interest rates are high. That sucks right now, or they're higher than they were. I think that people tend to get too wrapped up in that and see it as this big scary monster. Interest rate is just an expense. It's just a line item, just like your insurance, just like anything else. So as long as you're running your numbers where it works now at the interest rate you're able to get now. There's a lot of people running around out there saying marry the house, date the rate, and I really hate that, and it makes me want to scream every time I see it, because I think that people get irresponsible with that advice. Don't buy something that doesn't work now based on the fact that interest rates could go down. Yeah. I don't think that's smart. If you can refinance in a few years for a lower interest rate and your payments lower, great, that's extra. But make sure that it works now and don't bank on what could happen in the future, because we don't know. So I do think that that regional drivable vacation markets are going to continue to be markets that see that weather the storm a little better than other areas. I know there are people that like metro markets, and that's fine. But that's just not something that I'm interested in, because at the end of the day, I don't like markets that have a ton of hotel presence, with some exceptions, and I don't like markets that have a lot of people that are primary homeowners that live there, because those are the 2 things that contribute the most to anti-short-term rental regulations. I mean, take me, for example. I make my living off short-term rentals, and I live in a vacation market, but somebody bought a house at the end of my street last year, and I was the first person to be like, you're not going to short-term rent that, are you? Like, I don't want that on my street. So like, if I don't want one next to me, neither does anybody else who doesn't make their living off of short-term rentals. So I would say be conservative, make sure the numbers work the way they are, maybe pivot to some lower price markets than we were looking at, in the past couple of years. And, but yeah, I think that there will always be a reason to not buy something. But I also think that by waiting, you can wait yourself out of ever getting started.
I like that. Now, something I've seen, should investors, experienced investors, so we're talking maybe they got in, let's say in 2021, and they've seen the successes of 2021 and probably a little bit of growth and success in 2022, can they expect the same returns in properties that they find today, or should they recalibrate, we should say?
I would recalibrate. I would look at 2022 numbers. They're definitely a little more normal than 2021. So now that I don't think AirDNA is out with their December numbers yet, but definitely look at that. Look at ways that you can improve a property to improve the income. Because typically you can do that with decor for cheaper than, just buying a bigger or quote better house. But yeah, I think that's all I got on that.
Are you seeing better deals for smaller because that's a trend I've actually been seeing more is smaller homes. So just so everybody knows, I'm going to put this in the comments, but STR Insights just put out the top markets report for 2023, top markets to invest in for 2023. I'll put that in the comments, but the link to it. But in that report, when we were creating that report, there were a lot of markets that had a higher average ROI for a lesser budget. We're talking 300 to 500, then 500 to 750. And then after that, it really just dropped off in terms of the average ROI. So even in those bigger markets that are maybe more expensive, where are you seeing the better deals? Is it smaller properties or is it evenly distributed?
I would say depending on the market, it's evenly distributed. Like there are some markets where the average vacationer, you really only need like a 2-bedroom, but then some markets where people have really huge like family vacations, like Destin or 30A, where the bigger ones really do it kind of goes up in terms of the return on investment between smaller ones and larger ones. So it depends on the market. I own, of my 8 that we own, 4 of them are 2 bedrooms and under. So we've got a nice mix, and it just kind of depends on the market.
Gotcha. Okay. If you don't mind sharing, do you have an investment strategy for 2023 personally, like what you're planning to do?
So I have 250 doors. 8 of them are short-term rentals. The rest of them are just traditional multifamily long-term and single-family rehab buy and hold long-terms. So I'm just kind of like, I don't have a specific strategy other than I'm just kind of keeping my eyes open for everything, because I do think that prices are coming down and they're going to be deals to be had. I'm not exactly sure from what direction those will be coming. So I'm just kind of keeping an eye on everything. But we're planning to do quite a bit of buying this year.
So buying short-term rental, long-term rental, anything,
whatever shows up, wherever the best deal pops up.
I love it. And I think that needs to be emphasized. I mean, everybody listening, short-term rentals aren't the only, asset class in real estate. There are other asset classes. And I know long-term rentals, even midterm rentals has gotten kind of blown up a little bit in some of the metro markets. But long-term rentals, it's not as sexy, but it's making a comeback in some of the areas because of what the short-term rentals have done and the demand. I was talking to Kyle Stanley, Fearless Kyle, and I can't remember what city it was, but it was a town of 20,000 homes, residential homes, and 5,000 of them were short-term rentals. So it's like, where do people live that work there? Or live, where, seriously. So, and a lot of people have to pay rent because they can't afford the housing prices. And so I've seen rents, just long-term rents, shoot up where it's actually starting to make sense to look at a long-term rental instead of just purely short-term rentals. So personally, what I'm seeing too, and I love that you mentioned that, and what I'm targeting as well is I'm going to be looking at some long-term rentals, not just short-term rentals, because I think there's opportunity in both that are going to come up. And focusing on one in 2023 probably isn't the most prudent decision. So, all right. Let's take a few questions. We kind of have some all around on the board here. Let's, I guess, start with Meg's question. Hey, Avery, you mentioned weekly tweakings. What should I be performing for my STR for 2023? Yeah, that's a kind of a good question. Yeah, about in a sense of like, how should you approach 2023 with weekly? I'm assuming this is pricing.
Yeah, I would.
Meg.
Mostly, at least with us, what we're going in and tweaking weekly is pricing. If you're not getting, if your listing is kind of sitting stagnant and hasn't really had any action for a week or two, like it's time to go in there and make sure that you're messing with some things, and maybe tweaking your listing, changing around cover photos, seeing what gets a few bites. But I think where people get really where they make their mistakes is where they just like leave their pricing what it is and forget about it. You have to constantly be going in and tweaking it and kind of fishing for those bookings.
Yeah, I really, yeah, I think that's really important. And understanding when the compression events are in your particular market. I'll just remind everybody. So in 2024, there's a solar eclipse. And if you're in that path of the 100% or whatever for the solar eclipse, which is like a good part of the country, you need to look at those dates and raise your prices for those dates. People are already booking in markets for 2024. So just keep that in mind. But I think that goes back to understanding like raising prices when you need to and lowering them, and that's really how you maximize revenue. So I agree with that. I think, Meg, you really need to be looking at future events and also comparing, look at the competition, see what the competition is doing in your area and see what rates they're doing and maybe where you should fall. One question I have actually, Avery, is from an analysis perspective. I want to get your opinion on this. I have a very strong opinion on it, and I'll share that afterwards. But before people, and a lot of people are still doing this method where we're looking at the 50th, 75th revenue percentiles and 90th percentiles to forecast or project revenue. Do you think that can still apply in these markets?
It can. What I would personally do is more of the enemy method and looking at the properties that are right around where you're trying to buy something and look at how you can be better than those guys. Because at the end of the day, you're having to be, in order to get booked, you have to be better than your competition. So sometimes that's as small of a thing as just having pro photos. And sometimes, it's a bigger thing. Like maybe you need to add a hot tub or some arcades like right behind you or something like that. But you really want to be looking, I would look more at your competition, at the intangibles, like the data will always give you the numbers, but you need to be looking at why those numbers say what they say. Like, well, is this property performing like this because it's really badass, or is it performing like this because everybody else sucks? Like, you want to know which of those things is the truth so that you can then, be at the top of the heap there.
And for everyone who doesn't know what the enemy method is, real quick, so I believe you were the one who coined that phrase.
It was Luke, actually.
Oh, it was Luke. Okay, the enemy method. Basically, it's looking at comparable properties near you. I love that. And literally that's what I was going to say. So I'm not even going to say it because I believe it, strongly believe in that method because it's looking at comparable properties. When you do that, you're not the number one mistake I see investors make is when they analyze a property is they'll put in a property's address in a free calculator. There's many of them online. And they'll rely on those numbers. They'll say, oh, well, it said this. And they might dig in a little bit deeper or they might, run with that. But they'll make a decision where they should go from there based on that number. And the problem with that, the number one problem with that is it discounts location because it's taking in a radius of all properties that surround it. And so if you're on a beach and you're using that, you're taking in the revenue of properties that are off the beach. And vice versa, tier 3 or tier 2, I call it tier, from, beaches, for example, tier 1's on the beach, tier 2 off the beach, tier 3, like 10, 20 minutes away. Tier 3 properties should not expect the revenue of tier 1 properties. But when we use these calculators, that's what ends up happening. So that's why I love the enemy method, because you can dial in and find properties. It's very manual and it takes time, because you have to go and click through those properties to figure out and understand the market. And then you're able to assess the property and why and how much it can make. So I love it. I love what you said. And, and I 100% agree with that. So we, and that kind of answers a question from Paras, but he did ask, they did ask another one. So, this is a good question and I'll have an answer for it too, but what percentage, so what's your CapEx, your capital expense ratio? Do you typically just high level when you're looking at a property?
So just CapEx?
Yeah, so percent, yeah, just a CapEx, yeah.
It depends. It depends on how old the property is, how much it needs. I would say not more than 5% on these. And I know it's a lot higher. There's a lot of formulas out there that say calculate CapEx a lot higher. Keep in mind that a lot of those formulas were built for long-term rentals where, if you're 5% of $1,000 a month versus 5% of $5,000 a month is a lot. And you're probably not, in most cases, going to need to budget too much more than that. So I would say a max of 5% CapEx.
Okay. Yeah. And also, and then also for anyone listening as well, another mistake, because I think that's really, that's a good way to put it, what you said. But another mistake I see a lot of investors do is not calculate in their pro forma's appropriate expenses, for a short-term rental. I think in 2023, prices are going up. We need to, so I used to budget when I was looking at just high level percentage of the sales price, percentage of revenue, gross revenue. I would budget about 40%.
Oh no,
my gross revenue would go towards expenses. Oh, am I still there?
No, you're back. You're back.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. So I'm talking about just gross expenses for a particular property out of gross revenue. So the growth, so about 40%. Now it's moved to 50%. We've seen insurance rates shoot through the roof. And people aren't thinking about that. Tax reassessments, that's another thing too. People really need to take into account is tax reassessments. If you buy a property from an owner who's had that property for a long time, you're going to get hit hard with a tax reassessment. And that needs to be in your pro forma when you're running the numbers. So I'm throwing this stuff out here too, adding it onto this because these are the things that we need to be looking forward to in 2023 when we're running our numbers. We're going to have to be a lot better and more accurate on our pro formas with the expense side because I've seen a lot of people really get messed up with that where their expenses are a lot higher than they were projecting. Things are just getting tighter right now. So it's better to be more accurate on that. Okay, let's see. Does anybody have any other questions who's listening for myself or for Avery? Mainly for Avery. See? All right. Well, while anyone's, we've got a couple minutes left. But so, Avery, I guess, give us your, do you have any parting words of wisdom for 2023? Anything? Are you looking? I know we kind of just talked about, hey, things are changing. Things are getting tighter, is there anything I guess I want to live on a positive note. What optimism are you, do you see for 2023 across the board, I guess?
I mean, I see 2023 as the best time to be a buyer in the past 3 or 4 years in terms of actually being able to get a deal. Yes, expenses are a little tighter because interest rates are higher, but in terms of being able to get money off the purchase price or get your closing costs contributed to, which is a big, people forget about that. If you're like, okay, I'm going to put $30,000 down on this house, it can be another $5,000 or $10,000 even for closing costs. So getting a seller to contribute towards your closing costs is really helpful. I think a lot of people forget about that expense. And then you can use that to buy down your interest rate a little bit to lower your monthly payment. So I would definitely recommend doing that. But it's the best time to be a real estate investor in the past 5 years. I think there's going to be a lot of really great buying opportunities over the next year. You just have to, run your numbers very well, like we've been discussing for the past 45 minutes. So be conservative, run your numbers, and it's a really good time to be a buyer.
Great. So Shannon is asking, what's the new market? Can you tell us, or do we need to wait?
Yeah. So the next one we're opening.
Drum roll.
It's a little.
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
It's a little bit outside our norm, but it's proven to be a good one. Over the past several years, is Scottsdale.
Okay, great. I actually didn't know that one. I was thinking of another one you told me, but okay.
Yeah, I don't have contract signed in that one yet, so I can't.
Okay, all right. We won't say it, but. It's interesting though, because a lot of these markets, there's outside of Scottsdale is Cottonwood, I think, and that was in the top markets report.
Yeah, Mesa too, I think, which is right there. I don't have it in front of me, and I don't have my Arizona geography like down pat yet. But there's a lot of good little areas right outside as well. So pretty excited.
Great. Yeah, and it's interesting. There's some anyway. If you want to see some markets and that they're going into, go download our report. There's actually a few markets they're getting into that are in the report. And then they'll reveal them as they come out. So anyway, that's exciting. We do last kind of question. So so Paras said, okay, so if I'm an new investor in the Smokies, I don't have 20% to put down. How do I get into that market? Obviously, you can do a second home loan, 10%. But that does bring up a good, and answer this in 30 seconds or less. Do you still believe that second home loans are a great way to enter into the short-term rental game?
Okay, let me first preface this by you can get a conventional investment loan for 15% down as long as it's under the jumbo limit. I do still like second home loans, but you really do need to be using that as a second home for at least 2 weeks out of the year. So if you're buying in a place that you want to visit some, but rent it out the rest of the year, great, that's allowed. But I just don't want you guys to get into a gray area and then get into a red area with the second home loans because, eventually somebody is going to do something egregious and I don't want it to be one of you guys. So my rule of thumb is like, if you're running spreadsheets on it, you should probably just go ahead and do the investment loan so you're not skirting any rules. I like to play by the rules.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I would definitely speak for us to a lender. I know a good one, Brian with Huntington Bank. Reach out to him. He's great. They have some great rates and everything as well. And you can reach out to me and I can give you his contact information. Somebody asked me about Luray. So Luray, Virginia, this is in the Shenandoah area, still an excellent market. Do you know much about this market, Avery?
It might be one of the ones we're going to open up pretty soon.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. Sorry. Well, anyway, so obviously it's kind of been on the radar for a little bit. Great market outside of Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, about an hour and a half from those cities. And it's near the Shenandoah National Park. I think 4 million people a year go to the Shenandoah National Park. I like Luray because Luray is there. So Front Royal is north of Luray and it has some strict regulation. But then the short-term rentals are allowed in Luray. So it's a great market. I would check it out on STR Insights. So anyway, so yeah, let's go ahead and wrap it up because I think my internet connection is kind of dropping. So Avery, what's the best way people can get in contact with you?
Yeah, you can hit me up on Instagram at The Short Term Shop or on our website, theshorttermshop.com.
Perfect. So I put it there, theshorttermshop.com. I spelled it correctly. I always check these things. Anyway, I am the data guy, not the English guy. So bear with me. But so that is spelled correctly. Thank you, Avery, for hopping on. I appreciate it. I appreciate all your insights. I do want to say, if you guys enjoyed what Avery had to say and you do want to connect with her and see her in person live, when can they do that next?
Well, next would be next week at Ryan Pineda's conference in Las Vegas on the 12th. I'll be there. Yeah. I'll also be at Bill's conference, Bill and Mike's conference, the Build Short-Term Rental Wealth Conference in Nashville in March.
That's right. And if you buy a ticket to that, don't use the code Avery, use the code So Avery and I had a competition for the ticket sales for that one. But anyway, so thank you so much, Avery. Thanks, everybody. And have a great day.
Thanks for having me, Kenny.